Hi, everybody. Back with a breaking news edition of the Liberty Moving podcast. So, I mentioned this earlier when I did the earlier podcast, basically about how government scapegoats or people scapegoat other groups for what the government actually does. And in the context of talking about how the younger generations are all pissed off at boomers for the fact that they're broke, I pointed out that that's total bullshit. And I said, my estimate is that 80% of the wealth these young people produce is stolen or destroyed by the government. And I just happened to mention in an offhand way that even Grok wouldn't have that number. Actually, that's true. Grok didn't have the number. But I thought later on when I went back home, I said, I'm going to try this out on Grok. And interesting story. It's not going to be too long today. So when I first asked Grok how much money the government steals or destroys for the average American, I think Grok had a figure of $60,000 average American income. And Grok said something like, well, it had a tax estimate, and the number that Grok came up with was like 37% that the government takes or destroys. 37% of the wealth of the average wage earner. So I'm a rather stubborn fellow, and I started to engage in a sort of a Socratic dialogue with Grok. And over the course of about an hour, I started shooting questions and other factors that Grok may or may not have taken account of. And this went on for quite a while. And long story short, by the end of the hour, I got Grok to admit, and this is all tentative, it's not published, haven't published the mathematics, but this is basically the smartest computer in the world agreeing with my hypothesis, and I've been saying this for years, that the government takes or destroys 80% of your wealth. I use that as an assumption or a hypothesis or an estimate. But Grok has confirmed this figure tentatively. I'll be doing more verification to make sure that we didn't miss anything. I know we missed things because I wasn't even prepared to do this. All I was doing was spitballing. I just kept thinking of what about this and what about that and what about that and the other thing. And I'm sure there's things I've left out. I doubt that there's a lot I've left out. On the other hand, have some concern for duplication, although Grok, it's funny because one of the factors I threw at Grok, I don't understand the math, but it ended up lowering the figure because of double counting. But this is an extremely important number because the liberty movement has not effectively communicated to the public, and I'm doing it now, the amazingly drastic effect that government has on the wealth of the average person. And that's why you get these people talking about a living wage instead of complaining about the goddamn government. That's why you got these millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Zers complaining about, well, an older, healthier boomer might be taking a couple $100 more in socialism security than they paid in per month. It's like, are you people kidding me? We have to get real in the liberty movement, and we have to start communicating. I'm going to verify this number, but I've been using it as an estimate for years. And now that the smartest computer in the world has gone through a very complicated, detailed analysis that I wouldn't be able to do in a million years, and it has no biases. I don't own Twitter. It's just taken the data that's out there and done some calculations with its AI brain, which I haven't a clue how that works. But isn't it funny? I've been estimating this for years that it's 80%. And I got Grok to admit, after 30 rounds of questions, that it was 80.7%. And I will publish all this soon, and then people can go through some process of criticism and the thing that you would have usually in academia, where people would scrutinize the work, peer review, whatever you want to fucking call it. I'm not in academia. Academia is not the world. Geez, I went on a walk before. I had no signal interruptions, but now I do. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that we factored in to get to this 80%. This isn't going to be a particularly long podcast. So direct taxes, 42%. I asked Grok about fees. I talked about travel expenses, visas, passports, the drug war, wars, refugees, indirect losses. So basically, I said, okay, the average person pays X amount of taxes, but everything you buy has already has taxes embedded in it. And it called it, and it said, yes, you're right. There's a cascading effect, or taxes on taxes. So it factored that in. Paperwork, infrastructure, inflation I asked it about. I said, what about traffic tickets? What about tariffs? I thought of all the zero. I had zero preparations off the top. Record number of signal interruptions. So fucking annoying. We're going to fix that soon, folks. Don't worry about it. But I threw at it the easy stuff, and then it hadn't factored in regulation. I said, what about regulation? I said, what about regulations on regulations? And it added that. And as I kept getting that, pushing that number upward and upward, I got into the 65s. I got around 70, and then when I got in the high 70s, I really started to bear down. And at the end, I asked it one more question. I said, look, well, right before I got to the figure, I asked Grok if I was leaving anything out. And sure enough, it mentioned 2 or 3 things. I don't remember what they are. I have the whole thread printed out, I think, or I can duplicate it if I have to. And I am going to publish this thing so people can understand how we got to this number. And Grok came up with a couple of things, and it did those calculations, added up. And I was at 79.5. I was 5.5. I was a half a percentage point away from this goal of 80%. I like round numbers, can you tell? And I thought of everything I could think of. I thought of gun licensing and passport laws and how wars cause trade embargoes and raise prices and destroy capital and interfere with trade and travel and affect the economy. And I'm waiting around for the answer. It didn't take it very long. So yeah, came back and said, yep, all those count, and you're at 80.7%. So granted, this is an estimate. It's not peer reviewed, it's not academic, but it is a confirmation of my hypothesis by the smartest computer in the world. I'll publish all the stats and we'll redo this thing. I'll have details on it because I'm going to use this number. I'm going to use this number a lot, and we need to start using this number. This notion that we pay 30% in taxes, that's all bullshit. When people complain about, I have to, when I explain to people that the reason why, not that people have the, if people choose to use daycare, that's one thing. But the fact that people have to use daycare, which is what I'm told all the time. People generally don't want to use daycare. They have to use daycare. This is why. It's not like the 40s and 50s. There's been government grows. That's what it does. If you read my book, Political Class Dismissed, you will read that analysis. Government is growing all the time. And although taxes are relatively easy to measure, and inflation is somewhat Next easiest to measure. Regulations is not at all easy to measure. And I said, at one point I said, what about driver's ed courses? What about mandatory insurance? What about mandatory legal education? What about mandatory medical education? What about people filling out applications and standing in line to become a security guard? When you factor in all these things, it's just almost impossible to do. And in all honesty, none of the think tanks have done this number. I asked Grok, has anybody attempted to come up with a number like this? And Grok said no. So this statistic is relevant to so many different policy issues. Maybe I'll get a bumper sticker out on it. So bottom line, to recap, I have for years estimated that government steals or destroys 80% of our wealth. The smartest computer in the world, after I asked it 30 different questions, finally came up with the calculation of 80.7% estimate, just ballpark 80%. Give or take a few points. There might be a little bit of overcounting at the end or double counting at the end, but not much. And of course, there's probably other factors I left out because I wasn't prepared for this. I was doing it off the top of my head. And although I'm pretty good at this stuff, I'm certain, I'm absolutely positive I've left things out. So that's actually the true impact of government on your personal wealth situation. It's a devastating critique of the progressive state of America. And if I may say, the people who are defending the current administration on my Facebook page, thinking, oh my God, this is the best of all possible worlds. Trump is doing virtually nothing, maybe cutting a few regulations here and there. Trump is doing very little to change this 80% figure of wealth destruction. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, folks. So again, what you're getting on this podcast is absolutely, completely, totally fucking original stuff. And I'll end with a rhetorical question. Where's my Pulitzer? Where's my Nobel Prize? Thank you, everybody.